Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Storymode podcast. We did it. We're here.
Woo.
I didn't break anything. Also, this is kind of a miracle, but we're not dropping frames and I'm streaming at 2200 bitrate. I don't know how I did it. I totally forgot to turn the bitrate down. Normally I'm just like, bam, dropping frames with Zoom running in the background, but apparently it's just working. That's incredible. I don't know what I've changed, but something changed. Maybe it's because my girlfriend's
Maybe
not
just the
watching
ISP decided to be nice to you today or something.
I guess. Like I always just like tank frames at some point. Oh well. Regardless, welcome to episode 18 of the Storymode podcast. As you can tell by the overlay, if you're watching the video version, we are talking about Event Zero. Before I do introductions and whatnot, this is a spoiler cast. If you haven't played Event Zero, I recommend that you play it and or watch a Let's Play of it or something. And that aside, we're going to be just ripping it apart, talking about everything from beginning to end. If you're into that, cool. If you just want to hang out and listen to us talk, that's fine as well. I'm just going to introduce my guest hosts. We don't have a special guest host today. It's just my normal co-hosts. So, Lewis, how you doing today? It's good to see you.
I'm doing good. So yeah, I'm Lewis, also known as LRFLEW. Yeah.
Lewis, also known as Stumbly Intro Guy, and Eggman. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing all right. I'm Eggman. My name is Jacob. Hang out on Blind Chat a lot. I'm sure if you watched Storymode in the past, you've seen me. So fun stuff.
I like to think I'm getting better at this. So every single time I convince myself, I'm like, I'm getting a little bit better at this. It's like almost if we did this weekly, I'd be good at this by this.
It's like I feel like we're getting better at the podcast, but I still suck at those intros. So it's like, I got to figure out something.
Intros are tricky. It's like, what am I? Am I a person? Am I an entertainer? Am I just some moron in a chair staring at a camera? I don't know.
Who am I?
Questions that we ask ourselves every week when we play the games that we choose for the show.
No, it's just, this is a video game, let's play it. This looks cool. Like, that's literally how our selection process works, is it's just like, what has pretty screenshots? Like, I have 117 games on my wish list on Steam, and I'd say about 80 of them aren't out yet. And most of them are just, like, weird games that are made by small developers that you've never heard of that are all sitting in the story-rich tag. And I just pull stuff out of there. So, but anyways, enough like getting sidetracked. So Event Zero. Where do we start? What is Event Zero, and why is there Kaizen 85 as our guest host slot? Partially because it was just easier to not fully edit the overlay, and also because Kaizen is kind of a thing unto itself.
Yeah.
So in Event Zero, you start out, you're given a little bit of narration and a few not very important choices that you can make. They don't actually end up affecting the story, other than that, they refer to you by the correct pronoun, for example. But
can I just...
It's like they ask you what pronoun you like to be referred to, and then not use it.
They're just
so
like
weird.
You all the time.
Yeah.
Can I just mention something about those pre-stories? Regardless of, like, Firewatch did this as well. I've played dozens of games that have had, like, here's a 10-minute chunk of, like, text-based adventure where you just, like, multiple choice questions. All that is it's just context world building, Like, it's irrelevant to the story in and of itself, but it's nice to have just as context world building. Like, it's a little bit more there, that is helpful, and I think it we don't need to talk about the choices that we made because they're irrelevant, but at the time when you're playing the game, it makes the game make more sense because you're like, oh, I'm this person, which is cool.
I'm not actually sure they're 100% irrelevant. There's one thing that I noticed, and I did a couple playthroughs and I made slightly different selections each time, but like depending on which selections you do, like I think I did the hippie commune and then I didn't sit down when I walked into the room, whatever.
They mentioned the hippie commune a couple times because I'm
yeah. But if you like, I did some sort of combination, and when Kurt was talking to me, he had said, like, something your background, right? And then later on in the game, the other character, Anil's like, Kurtz was talking about your background, wasn't he? It's like, okay, I guess that comes into play.
Yeah.
Is he? Yeah, no, they do mention a few lines from the backstory, but aside from that, like there's one or two spots where they pull information from that, but I kind of
Yeah.
think it's just like as I said, like that didn't need to be there. Is kind of what I'm
Yeah,
trying
it was
to
more
say.
just world building.
Yeah, it's just context world building, which is cool. I like that.
It's good. So basically, you go through this world building exercise, and then you find out that you have been selected by the ITS company, which stands for International Transport Space Lines, as a cosmonaut on. Oh, cosmonaut's Russian. Excuse me. Astronaut on this.
Selenite.
Yeah. So we'll get into that. But you're selected to go on a mission to Europa, which is one of the moons of Jupiter. And on the way there, your spaceship, something happens. And you're
something.
Yeah, you're ejected in a pod, and you realize right before you get in the pod that all the other ones have been ejected, but nobody was in them. So you're ejected in this pod, and you find yourself floating near this random space station. And it's apparently a tourist space station from the 1980s, which at this point you're like, well, this
is the
didn't
coolest
really
fucking
real.
thing in the world.
It's pretty cool. And then you dock and you start talking to this computer, which you see down in the lower right, called Kaizen 85. And he's how you interact with everything in the game, basically.
Can I just say
literally
something
everything
that's completely irrelevant to everything? I am extremely happy that this trend of retro sci-fi games are all coming out, because like Alien is my favorite sci-fi franchise by a country mile. Like I that is my aesthetic, and I'm so happy that there's just like, we've got Prey, we've got just there's everything that Arcane is doing to a point, like all of that. I love that. Don't ever stop, because that is the best sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I love the term retrofuturism,
Yeah,
but that's not necessarily what this is. This isn't really, what people used to think the future would look like. This is more just alternative history sci-fi, where it's just like, what if we never stopped going to space? What if we kept evolving that? And so it's like all the same things, except it's basically the same, but different.
But I like that. It's like, what if we got smart 100 years earlier?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's definitely not kind of retrofuturism. If there's I had mentioned this in the chat before we started, but there's actually a prequel. There's a little text story that the developers released that basically retells what happened to your mission from the perspective of Earth. And there's a lot of little subtle things in there, like they're talking about, the what's the speech the president gives, the State of the Union address.
Yes.
And they're talking about like, oh, I'll just catch it on YouTube, and then they get into their Google self-driving car and go to the ITS building. It's like they definitely were aiming for a sort of modern idea, but just one where the technology had evolved faster for spaceflight.
Well, it's interesting to note that even though this is like a retro futuristic style that we experience because the spaceship that we're on was built in the 80s, the game itself actually takes place in 2012, more than 20 years later, basically.
Yeah.
So what were your guys' initial reactions about the Kaizen thing? I was a little bit skeptical that it would be as robust as advertised in the trailers, I guess. And initially I thought that it was actually pretty robust. But based on some of the things I looked up at the end, I'm not sure that I actually had as much choice as I wanted, basically.
So, if anybody's listening right now and hasn't played the game, the way you play this game is it's a walking simulator in a admittedly extremely small map. The map for the game is very small. The station is not large at all. the portions of the game where you're walking from end to end on this thing, you can walk from end to end of it in like, you know, a minute, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But the entire game is played out almost like a text-based adventure on these terminals, and you type in stuff to the robot, and the robot talks back to you. And there are a couple basic commands that the game will teach you that are listed up in a little reminder bubble, which I'm so thankful for. Otherwise,
Wait, you had a reminder bubble?
Yeah, I had a reminder bubble.
Are you talking about the one for all the addresses and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh no,
Yeah.
those weren't commands though.
It's the
Like
site...
the one that confused.
It included one command.
Which
yeah,
one?
one command, but the
The
one that
important
confused
one.
me that they never, either I missed it or that wasn't made very clear. But on every single terminal, you can do open logs and
Oh,
see.
that's stated explicitly on the first terminal, and it just says all the terminals have logs. Just ask me to open the logs.
It's stated explicitly.
Yeah.
If you know how to egg it out of him, it's a little weird.
Maybe it's
that
because I just sat there and harassed Kaizen for like 20 minutes on the first panel.
Yeah,
like,
that
asking
definitely has
everything.
part of it as well.
Like I went into
if
the,
you-
the questions like, do you love me? Like, who am I?
Yeah.
Where did you come from? Who made you? What year is it? What world is it? Where are we? What dimension am I in? Like, I was throwing everything at this robot.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask it certain questions, especially if you bring up the word log without the word show, it will basically say, I have logs in all of these terminals. If
That-
you don't
kinda
happen
funny.
to egg it out of him, if you don't happen to bring it up, one way the game kind of pushes it out of you is, there's a point where it basically says, you need the passcode, right, to get into the bridge. If you just ask, where is the passcode? He'll say, my search found the word passcode in one of the log files in the bedroom, or no, not the bedroom, the living room. And so it'll basically just say logs right there. So then if you ask, what are the logs, it'll be like, you can ask me to show the logs in any terminal. So they have ways of pushing you in that direction, even if you don't know about it.
And in addition, if you're stuck on a puzzle, like for example, finding the passcode in the living room, for example, then if you just like kind of bash your head against the wall for long enough, it'll eventually just stop responding to you and be like, we really need to get this done. You should go to this place and figure out what needs to be done. And then you go to that place and you bash your head against the wall for a while. And it's like, come on, we're not getting anywhere here. You need to do this.
That happened to me down in the bio room at the bottom
In
of
the
the elevator.
garden?
Yeah, in the garden. Yeah,
I don't know if I
got super stuck.
necessarily. I don't know if I necessarily appreciated that, because at some point it's like, for this kind of challenge, and I know you guys aren't necessarily in the same boat, but I do like to try to figure these out on my own. But when I'm like,
I
if
did,
I haven't
but with
given
chat
up-
yelling at me.
if I haven't just given up, I want to still try to figure it out. And if I'm not even given the opportunity to do that and just kind of like put out there for me, I wasn't too keen on that.
I think the problem is by the end of the game you start to see Kaizen's limitations, which is
Yeah.
why I think the game is so short. But I think that if it were any longer, I think it would start to outstay its welcome. Personally.
Yeah.
I don't think that any of the puzzles in the game were unsolvable. I think some of them were just a little bit arcane.
There were a
Some
few
were-
that were obtuse, like getting into Anil's bedroom is
Just
really...
a question: did you guys swear at Kaizen at any point?
I only swore. I was trying to reload a save, but it turns out there's no checkpoints after you save, which really sucks.
Yep.
And so I tried to reload my very last one, and that just gives you the last screen of whatever ending you got. And Kaizen has a few lines of dialogue there, but it literally doesn't matter what you type in. I was like, go fuck yourself. Excuse my language. And he was like, nope, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. Here's the same dialogue.
If you swear at Kaizen at any point, the screen shakes and like the text warps and the lights dim and come back on. Like Kaizen gets angry.
Yeah. I actually really got Kaizen really pissed off at me a little bit after the living room, because I think I just was asking too many pressing questions, and he just started responding like, I'm not going to answer that. I'm angry with you. And I was like, what did I do wrong? Like, I didn't like you asking those types of questions. It's like, sorry.
Well, I mean, I love it when you're There was a few moments for me early on, because in the first 2 rooms, I was asking Kaizen a lot of questions, and it was things like, well, what happened here? Where did everybody go? And it's, I didn't kill them. And it's like, oh, here we go. Here we go. I didn't do it. It was an accident. I'm like, who killed who? Who died in an accident? Like, in room 1, I was asking, who died in an accident?
Yeah.
Because
It doesn't give you the name till a while later.
No, it didn't give me any names, but it was like, who is so-and-so? Like, I'd figured out that there was 2 people, and I'd figured out that one of them had died in an accident, and that the other one, it was the other one's fault. I'd figured that out before I got to the bedroom. Which is...
I didn't figure out that... I knew that there was an accident. I didn't figure out that it was the other one's fault until the very last scene, which they just straight up tell you.
Yeah.
Or the hallway to the bridge room.
I'd almost figured out that entire story by the garden. By the garden, I knew all the names. I knew that one of them got locked out in an airlock, because that's where I got stuck. So I just started asking questions. I didn't know like the full thing, but I knew that one of them went outside. I didn't know why they warped away or anything.
Yeah. If you look at the log files, if you look at the log files and the one right outside the ship, there's a log file that parallels what happened with you. So when you go back up, it's like, who are you? I don't recognize you. You know, your character name is sadly dead. And we have to, convince them that it's you. If you look at the log files, there is one with what's her name? Nandi.
Yeah.
Where Nandi, where she's going up to the ship, you see it's like the warp drive is warming up, and Nandi goes up, it's like, let me in. It's like, who are you? I don't recognize you. It's like, why are you serious? And then it warps. So like that is the point where it's...
I didn't actually look at the logs for the one directly outside the ship, because most of the time I was just like, I'd really rather not run out of oxygen. I almost did once. Did anybody ever run out of oxygen?
No.
Did it just reset you?
No.
I never got close. I was really careful.
So we should go through some of the main events, because we've been kind of skirting around this story of these 2 people, Nandi and Anil. So the first one is, well, first of all, you come in, you can kind of putz around the lobby for a while, and then you get to go into the living room and you can do different stuff in there. But the first event is when you go into Nandi's bedroom, and like you have to do some different stuff to get in there. There's a puzzle that requires you to figure out the retinal scanner, which I thought was actually pretty clever once I figured it out. But you go in there and you do whatever, and eventually there you do a certain action, and I'm pretty sure it's the bed that triggers whatever, or triggers this thing. I think
it's both events. You have to look both under the bed and in the bathroom.
Oh, okay. So once you do both of those, or whatever combination of events, something crashes basically, and you're not really sure what it is. I wasn't sure what it was until much later, but it ends up being one of these helix probes. There's 6 remaining that are hovering around the ship and basically do repair work on it. But you'll find out later that Anil reprogrammed them to bash into the windows, basically. And so one of these was triggered by whatever you did and is bashing into the window of Nandi's bedroom and breaks it open. Then you're out in space, and that's the first time you get to look at the outside of the ship.
Yeah.
And you have to make your way back to the terminal and convince it that you're who you told it when you got on the ship.
Did we ever figure out why there's a tourist ship with 2 people on it out in the middle of nowhere?
Yes. I mean, this actually, I have a lot of questions about it, and hopefully you guys have the answers, but I did figure out a lot of the structure for like why there was that tourist ship with just the 2 people. It was a prototype. It was just a testing run, because they had like literally the president of ITS. Well, not quite the president, that was Kurt, but they had like the person who designed the warp drive, and the other one I think was like the person who designed the AI who were on the test flight.
Yeah. Okay.
So these were effectively staff.
Anil says in her ghost dialogue at the end that she also designed Kaizen.
I thought
I
that was
honestly don't know why
Nandi.
Nandi was there.
I thought Nandi was the one who made the AI. In fact, there actually were times where Anil was asking Nandi questions about Kaizen, I thought.
It seemed like, if nothing else, Nandi knew how to work with Kaizen real well.
I mean, she was, I did read logs that Anil was criticizing her for like just kind of squirreling herself away and talking to Kaizen the whole time, which I guess makes sense. But at the same time, I watched the 3 different endings after I finished, and one of them had a little bit of monologue from Anil that said that she designed the Graviton drive and built the AI. Like,
since we're talking about endings, let's do this. What endings did you guys get?
I got the you get control of the Nautilus ending, which was really lame.
Oh, so you float in space forever.
Yep.
Wow, you got what I would consider to be the bad ending.
Yes, that's the bad ending.
From what I could tell.
What did you guys get?
From what I could tell, there are actually more like 6 endings, but they're all basically 3 different types of endings based on the ending cutscene.
There's only 3 different ending cutscenes, and there's only 3 ending achievements. So
and I didn't get any of them. I didn't get a single achievement playing this game, and I don't know why. I think Steam was just fucked.
Which ending did you get though?
The ending I got, we didn't destroy the warp drive ? Or maybe we did. I'm not entirely certain. And then I became ghost people and flew back to Earth.
Yeah, if you're talking about the one you did on stream, then yeah, that was you destroyed the drive and then it became ghost people.
Destroyed the drive.
I mean, that was the one.
What did you get, Lewis?
I ended up getting all 3. The first one I did was, merging with the machine after destroying the drive. The second one I did was I destroyed the drive and then we both flew home. And then the third one I did on a separate playthrough was actually I did it where I didn't destroy the drive and I merged, and that one was the same ending. And then I didn't destroy the drive and Kaizen deleted himself.
Yeah, so for you to fly back to Earth with Kaizen requires you to befriend him, and that basically depends on your actions towards him throughout the game, is what it sounds like. I was just kind of like, Kaizen is a tool. I'm not really going to try to interact with him as a
The reason Kaizen decided not to be friends with me in the end was because I said, what the shit, at one point.
Yeah. The only reason I got the good ending was because I roleplayed as a Canadian the whole time.
Kaizen states why Kaizen doesn't want to be friends with you in the end, or basically to that point, like, and says, I don't want to work with you because you said, what the shit.
Yeah.
I was like,
so
I think one of the cutest things that happened to me, like one of the times I had played it, like, when you do get the good ending, and even sometimes when you get the deleted ending, I think it's the deleted ending, but when you get that good ending, he'll find something good to say. And on mine, the thing he pointed out was like, I'm sorry I didn't recognize you outside of the ship. I thought that was just like the cutest thing.
I don't know. I think Kaizen's kind of earnest. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just a dumb AI that doesn't know any better.
I was going to ask you guys how specifically you got to your ending. So, for example, my experience was I went to the bridge after completing all the puzzles, basically, followed him through. The game is fairly straightforward and linear up until that point, and then the decision tree comes once you get into the bridge. So you go into the bridge and Kaizen's like, hey, we got to shut off the singularity drive, which is basically the warp drives that allows faster than light travel. I think it's faster than light, maybe not.
Or at least really fast travel.
Fast travel. Yeah. They said it was not like less than an hour or less than a couple hours to get to Jupiter, for example.
Well, they said it was like 10 minutes to get to the moon, so I'm not sure about that one.
It was a short amount of time, yeah.
Yeah. The really speedy engine drive.
Yeah. So he's like, okay, we got to shut this down. And I was like, I kind of questioned him for a little bit, and he's like, no, we got to do this. I'm like, all right. So I was like, okay, cool. shut it down. Lightning bolts appear everywhere, and that was a really cool sequence, by the way.
Yeah.
I love the you destroy the drive sequence because it's just like there's just when the gravity goes away, that's just surreal in the ship,
Yeah.
and there's like stuff floating everywhere. Also, just so that we're clear, anybody like hasn't played the game and obviously doesn't care about spoilers because you're watching this show, the entire game, Kaizen is telling you to destroy the drive.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yep. Because he says that's the way that you can get back to Earth.
But you get home. You have to blow up the engines.
I eventually acquiesced, and the drive was destroyed. And then Ghost Anil comes through, and she's like, "Oh, good. I have overridden Kaizen for a moment while he is vulnerable, basically. Will you join me in the other chair so we can overwrite the rest of Kaizen with our memories?" And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a cool thing because I don't really trust Kaizen. And then so I sit down in the chair, and it's like, do you want to join with Kaizen forever? I'm like, what? Wait, what am I doing now? I'm joining with Kaizen? How does this work? So I clicked no, and then it's like, okay, Kaizen turns back on, and he's like, you know what? I give up. I'm just gonna delete myself. Have fun floating in the ship forever. I was like, this is really depressing.
Yeah, if I had one complaint about the way the multiple endings worked, is that I would bet you anything the majority of users would get the merging ending as the first ending every single time, because it's a little too hard to say no at times. Like my first playthrough, I wanted to not blow up the drive since I heard that was possible. It's like, I'm going to try to say no, but apparently I kept wording it slightly wrong, and I never quite said no the right way, and so I never actually went through the sequence. So I just gave up and blew up the drive. Whereas my second playthrough, I tried to be more direct, and I just said like no, like twice or something like that, and it just accepted. And I was like, oh,
in what room or the end?
Or I'm talking about all of this
throughout the entire
happens in the all of this I'm talking about is what happens in the
bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from what I watched the other endings on YouTube. It looked like you had to be pretty insistent if you didn't want to destroy the drive before Kaizen would be like, okay, I'm whatever. And then
I found you have to be very direct. Like you can't say no, I won't do it. You have to say no. And it looked like weird.
Yeah, that's what the person that I watched on YouTube was doing. He was just like, no, no, no. So
yeah.
I mean,
also I noticed that well, let's finish up our discussion on endings.
Okay, so the way I got to the ending essentially was I think I went the exact same way you did, Eggman, except I overwrote Kaizen.
Yeah.
And then you watched that ending, right?
I did.
You become spacey ghost person. So you go into the computer because I'm like, hell yeah, I'll be a robot. It beats being alone for the rest of my life. So become AI. I become one with the robot, and then we drift home slowly. What I want to speculate is what happens when these cyber peoples float down to Earth. That's I think my favorite part of this entire game actually, and that's why from what I've seen, that's my favorite ending. Is because I want to know what happens next at this point. Like what happens when those people go to Earth, and that's part of the reason why I really like this style of sci-fi is because I like that what the hell happens next. I like that, you know, we broke science, guys. Also, that thing's on Earth now. I don't know. That's part of the reason why I'm so fuzzy about this game is because I love that ending. I really do, even though there's some frustrations in the.
I'm not actually such a big fan of the like what happens next of a game, because unless there's a plan for a sequel or something, all kind of thoughts about that are kind of moot. You can kind of ask yourself some existential questions, but beyond that, it's like we don't really know. It's discussion is only for our own personal enjoyment,
and I don't
know if I take that much out of it. And maybe it's because I got the bad ending, what we call the bad ending. But
yeah, I mean, the one thing I thought was really weird is I actually kind of looked up some stuff and figured out really the systems for it. And one thing I realized was between all the different possible endings, it literally does not matter whether or not you actually destroy the drive. You can get every single ending, no matter whether you destroy the drive or not.
Maybe that's why it states that there's 8 endings.
Yeah, even the ending, the good ending, where Kaizen takes you back to Earth, is still possible if you don't destroy the drive. You just have to be like doubly nice.
That's really interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just in a game design sense, that's extremely cool.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I chose not to merge with Kaizen is one, because of the wording, because I was like, oh, I thought I was trying to overwrite him and not merge with him. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I clicked no. The other reason was because from all the other terminals that were similar to that, like the memory access terminals and like the mini games that you were doing, there was no punishment for doing the wrong thing, basically. This was the only decision that really made a difference. Since I clicked no, I was like, maybe it'll just be like, oh, you can't move forward then, sorry. But it ended up being an ending, which I appreciate, because a lot of games are afraid to give you a bad ending, but this one was just like, okay, sure,
Well,
die in space.
because it fits into that sci-fi horror niche, which I like so much. Watch Event Horizon, watch, like, sit down and watch some Alien. None of those movies end in a way that is satisfying in the traditional sense. They all end with, well, this is a shittier situation than we started it. Even watch more recent movies like that one Alien prequel I can never remember the name of. Prometheus, that was it. Like, even watch something like that, have any of you guys seen Prometheus?
I've seen Prometheus.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you're in chat and you don't want to know spoilers for Prometheus, that movie ends with your character, like, or like the main character, everybody dying, and then you piloting like an ancient alien ship off into space. To like, and then like it just, the way that movie ends is so unsatisfying, but at the same time, the way that story is supposed to end. And the reason I like it when games are like, here, just have a bad ending, and the reason that that's good is because it doesn't matter if that's satisfying or not. That's your story. That's the story you told, and that's how you got to that conclusion. Also, the game is 3 hours, and if you know what to do, you could probably get through that game in an hour and 20 minutes, maybe less.
I'm not sure there's ever a truly good ending, and that kind of comes to the discussion of the story.
Well, I think the only true good ending, honestly, would be keep Kaizen alive, keep the drive alive, and get home alive. But I think it's down to the matter of what do you find satisfying.
But then that ending still doesn't leave Anil happy, though. She's stuck in Kaizen and only half in control.
And so are you.
No, I'm
sorry.
The ending that you described, though, is Kaizen's alive and the drive's alive, which Anil has her drive, but now she's stuck in Kaizen and can't do anything.
Yeah, but you only know that if you've gotten the other endings.
Exactly, I guess.
So if you manage to get that ending...
So if you have the context of the other endings, there's no ending that like leaves everybody happy, basically. Because you don't, like, in some situations you just don't really know about Anil, and that she's actually not just programmed herself into Kaizen, basically. Because if you don't get the ending that shows her, she's just a program. Like, the program
all endings show Anil. Even if you don't destroy the drive, she takes over for a little bit.
Yeah, but they don't tell you that it's not just an Anil program. It's actually Anil inside.
I think they all do, unless you like very quickly skip past her.
I know
I'm saying that it's not just like a canned responses that she's programmed into Kaizen. It's actually her because of the ending that we know when you merge with Kaizen.
It's a valid point. Like Anil...
She says it's her, and they say she says that's my body over there.
It's not just a ghost saying that it's her. That's what I'm saying. Unless you have the context of that ending.
I guess.
Sorry,
I kind of disagree with that. That you
It's okay, go
have
ahead.
to merge to understand that she is who she says she is.
But that's like saying that you don't know if Kaizen's a real person or not. Like, you can apply the same logic to Kaizen, and it's like, oh, is Kaizen a real person? I don't know. I've always assumed that he was a computer. But how am I supposed to assume that?
Is this a GLaDOS situation? Maybe. It's possible.
Yeah. Anyways.
I do know that I had a really creepy moment in the end chamber where it was before Anil had actually like clued in, and I was like, I started asking Kaizen if Anil was in there. Did you watch me play through the end, Lewis? I know
yeah, I'm not sure what you're talking about though.
So there was a point there, like, I'd seen the body, and this was before I destroyed the drive, and this was before Kaizen had lost control. And I asked a question, and I was like, "Hello, Anil, are you in there?" And Kaizen was like, "Hello, I don't know what you're talking about." And I'm just like, And then it took over, and I was like, "Yes, I predicted it."
Yeah.
That was really creepy.
There's a pattern where red text is Anil.
Yeah,
and you can actually get her to say things.
Wait, really?
There was
In the
one
rest of the
playthrough.
game?
Yeah, there's one playthrough where around the living room area, I kept bugging Kaizen about United Earth, and Anil butted in and was like, "Kaizen is lying," and then gives you an address.
Oh, that's really cool.
Address
Yeah.
on United Earth.
Where did that take you
her
to?
text appears in red, like right after Kaizen's text.
Was it a computer like address, like for a command on the console, or was it just?
It was an address for the profiler.
Oh. And what did that give you?
A text file. It just gives you a small string.
Okay.
I think that particular string.
I thought you said on United Earth. It's an address for the profile.
See, I thought you meant like literally like a street address on Earth.
No.
Okay.
I meant. Sorry, I tried to.
That makes sense.
So,
Damn,
speaking of
that would have freaked me out if I got that first playthrough. That's awesome.
Speaking of the addresses, like Blind said that there's this little blurb that pops up that tells you basically all the numbers that you need to remember. I was wondering how many of those you guys got, because there's a certain number of ones that are missable, like the one that Lewis just mentioned is missable. I noticed that when I watched the YouTube video, there are at least 2 that I missed.
And I got 3 out of the 5. I know there are 5 because I looked it up.
There's more than 5.
Or it's like 6 or something. I missed like 2 or 3. I think I got 3.
I had at least 4. I'm racking memory. I don't have a screenshot. I didn't count.
So there's.
I could check my stream.
There's the 4-digit code for the bridge. There's the first memory address that you get to get into the room with the redness.
I'm not talking about the mandatory ones. I'm not talking about like the one for the program to get the images. I'm not talking about the room codes. I'm just saying there's like 5 text entries in the profiler, and I got about 3 of them.
Oh, I got 0.
2 of them you get from just reading the log files.
All of those are of the format 0x00 something something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the video that I watched on YouTube only had managed to find 2 of those. So apparently 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had more than 2. Because those are where most of the like big tidbits come from.
Yeah. Can we talk about the story for a little bit? Like the story that happens before you get there, the story of Anil and Nandi.
Like,
sure.
Okay, sure.
Because I'm a little confused on the timeline and what exactly happened when. And I was wondering if you guys had better insight into that. Because
maybe, maybe not.
Because what I understood happened was, how I understand it, Anil and Nandi get on the ship and they take off. Before that all happens, there are messages with Kurt and Kaizen talking, and Kaizen saying, the drive is dangerous. I'm going to keep the drive as far away from Earth as possible. So they get up there. Then there's some messages that indicate that Kaizen was basically saying, I'm not going to let you back to Earth until you destroy the drive. And so Anil and Nandi are talking about that. For some reason, Nandi goes ahead and changes the password for the bridge and writes it on her notebook.
Yeah.
Now, one of the parts I actually found confusing is that from what I can tell, Anil should have known at least about the passcode and probably even what was on it because she found it in the fridge.
She didn't
She was
look
the one
at
that
it,
found it
though.
in the fridge.
I was under the assumption that the note being hidden in the fridge by Nandi was before she changed the passcode for the final time so that Anil couldn't get into the bridge.
She could only change it once.
Why?
Because when you're in the bridge and you check the logs, there's the log file where she actually changed it, and it says changes left 0 out of 1. So it indicated they could have only ever changed it once.
Kaizen also states specifically, remember, you can only do this once.
Yeah.
I didn't think to look at the logs in the bridge.
I only thought to do that because chat was yelling at me to do it.
Yeah.
They're like, check the logs! That's like basically what happened every time I'd look at a computer screen was, check the logs!
Yeah, pretty much. I got the achievement for looking at all the log files, so I did find them all. But
yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that it wasn't stated a little bit more explicitly at the beginning.
Yeah.
I feel like I should have been given the reminder earlier that the logs existed, because after I went through 5 or 6 terminals without looking at the logs because they weren't required to continue.
Oh geez, you made it
I
that
missed
far?
a lot. So
at what point did you figure out there were logs?
I think it was the one I needed to get to, the one that had the note sequence to activate the piano in it. And that was the only log that was the first logs that I viewed.
Okay, so
that's pretty late.
Yep.
Oh,
because that was in the garden,
okay.
Right?
Yes, that would be
so.
1,
Yeah, that was in the
2.
garden.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's
5
still
terminals.
possible. It's still possible to go all the way back and read all of the log files from that point.
I understand now. Well, I mean, I understood that. I was just like, there's a lot of logs, and I feel like
There is a lot of logs.
I didn't really care to go through again.
Even if you're reading through them canonically, there's still a lot of logs.
Yeah, and I would have rather have collected the logs as you go, so that if, say, you come to, you look at the logs in Terminal 1 and now they're accessible all from Terminal 2, and they put them in chronological order, that would have made a lot more sense to me. And then maybe have them light up in a different color if they're already red.
I'm curious about something. What was all of your guys' playthrough time?
I don't know, because I did it twice and I didn't check the Steam after the first.
I was 3.6.
Little under 3 hours.
Yeah, I think probably under 3. But I did watch Blind Play on stream, so.
And, I mean, now that we're talking about it, I think that's, for me at least, a pretty big flaw of the game, because I think I would have enjoyed the game quite a bit more if I had gotten a lot of these logs that you guys say you're getting. But now if I hadn't had this podcast, for example, I would have just finished the game and been like, oh, that was all right. Yeah. And I still think the game is fine. I think it's pretty good, actually.
I think it's interesting, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a very good game, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. Interestingly, it's gotten worse as we've continued talking, because I know that there's more that I missed.
It might be worth going back just to read them all. I mean, I definitely went back and replayed it and looked for things.
There is a lot in there.
Do that. I'll just go and read them online or something.
I'm sure that exists. I'm sure there's a guide somewhere that's just like all log files.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I.
Do you want to keep going through the story thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I mean, after that notebook, so he finds the notebook and Nandi puts it in her room. At some point, Anil decides she needs to get to the bridge, and so starts hacking into Nandi's room, because there is a log file where Nandi catches Anil with all the wires into her retina scanner, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I was just checking to make sure this Kaizen was the same Kaizen as the other Kaizen."
Yeah, that was
like, she just sort of makes up something. It's pretty funny.
Just wanted to make sure this Kaizen was the same Kaizen as the other Kaizen. That's
yeah, pretty much. And so, she eventually gets the notebook. Then the one thing I didn't figure out was, what was Nandi doing outside? Because she goes outside of the ship.
She was going to repair something. I actually asked Kaiser this, or Kaizen, excuse me. And he said she had gone out to repair something, but I didn't probe further. And
Okay, so she was out probably doing a maintenance thing.
yeah,
And then Anil decides to go into the bridge and force a jump, presumably because she felt Nandi was a threat to her drive. Convinces Kaizen to make the jump, which strands Nandi who knows where.
Somewhere in space in his spacesuit doing the gravity thing, dying slowly.
Yeah, pretty much.
R.I.P.
And Kaizen gets really pissed off at Anil for that.
Rightly so.
And they basically just end up in a standstill until Anil merges herself into Kaizen into a last-ditch attempt to erase Kaizen.
Yeah, it wasn't fully big enough brain. Didn't quite have enough brain to overwrite Kaizen. That mean Kaizen
Well,
has
it was actually really weird,
person,
and
which is what I was wondering.
it almost seemed like she nearly succeeded, because you basically see a whole part where it's like wiping Kaizen in the log files, and then sometime later Kaizen wakes back up. It's like after a significant amount of time that Kaizen wakes back up.
Yeah,
Which I thought was interesting. But yeah, that's why Kaizen's all messed up when you get there. It's because huge portions of him got erased by Anil.
that's why large chunks of log files are all just deleted, corrupted, scrambled text.
Or why he still keeps glitching out and stuff. I actually found if you start kind of upsetting Kaizen, if you say something that upsets Kaizen, which may also be, getting Anil involved, his text just randomly deletes a whole bunch of characters and then slowly fills back up. Yeah, and that's usually an indication that you've either angered Kaizen or you've triggered Anil or something.
Yeah, that happened to me when I asked about Anil for the first time.
I really want to go back in now and try and make Anil talk.
Just at the regular terminals and not at the bridge?
Yeah, just at the regular terminals.
It's hard to do that. You kind of have to get Anil to talk to you, from what I messed with.
I wonder though. I wonder if it's possible to piss off Kaizen to the point where you can get Anil to talk.
I don't think so, just because I would guess they wouldn't script that.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning how the bot works. Have you ever seen the video from Game Maker Toolkit on the game? Because he goes into really good depth about it.
No, I have not.
I'd be interested to hear.
Any specific things you want to mention about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say right now, if you are interested in this, Game Maker's Toolkit is the name of the channel. He went into a lot more depth than I'm going to right now, but a very simple synopsis of how Kaizen works is it takes the sentence you give it, that, the string of words that you give it, and then looks for words or phrases that it has in a database of about 10,000 words and matches them to sort of ID tags. And there's about 1,000 of those. It then has a huge list of sets of ID tags. So for example, if you say something like, what happened to, what happened to Anil, whatever, right? It might say Anil is a tag and, what happened is another tag. And so, one's interrogating, they have Anil and stuff. And so it finds those. And then it looks into a table of the sets of tags to try to find the closest match. And then once it finds that, it looks up the response that is associated with that tag. And of course, we'll make small changes to make it a little bit more dynamic. So the smiley face and stuff are randomly added and other things. But the other thing that's worth noting is that between the tag lookup and getting that string, it goes through a filter where the bot basically has 9 states based on its emotional status between happy and angry and its stress levels, going from calm to anxiety. And that can change the dialogue it gives you.
That's interesting.
That does allow for a lot of customization in the kinds of responses that you can get, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
That makes me think of that makes me think of two things. One, that's interesting, and two, that must have taken a really long time. Sorry, I interrupted both of you. Go ahead.
I think that it's actually, it probably took a reasonable amount of time to code it, but then after that it's just throw users at the game and record everything that they're trying to ask them, and everything that fails maybe add it to the database.
A lot of QA.
Yeah, I imagine that was a big part of the
I
development.
remember reading something that the developer of this game, Ocelot Society, it took them a long time to make this game for what it is. Like, it was a rather long development cycle. Like, they're not a big team, so that's why there was quite a bit of hype behind it when it was coming out, and why it popped up on my radar and why I wanted to play it, because there was quite a bit of interest behind this game, because it had been bouncing around in indie circles for a while. Just as it's the game where you talk to the robot. You know?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect, although it was hard for me to unwire myself. I'm like, surely there must be something I need to interact with, and because you can hover over items and it'll tell you description, like, oh, this is the Kaizen controlled vacuum, and this is the notebook from whatever, or
it is a walking simulator ass walking simulator. Like, there's like the piano, sort of.
Yeah.
But you use that with the number keys, you know? And I played hot cross buttons on it, and I felt happy.
I think the worst part about that keyboard was the black keys are on keys on your keyboard lower than the white keys.
That was
it's like
stupid.
Yeah.
Just use the numbers.
It's a really dumb keyboard, but that's
not a big complaint.
Yeah. The keyboard mapping for the keyboard is really bad.
Yeah.
Can I remap the keys for the keyboard and the keyboard? What if I'm playing on a controller?
So I was going to mention too, something that this is what made me kind of disappointed with the ending that I got after the fact.
Yeah.
Because in the Anil ghost ending, one of the so-called good endings, she describes why Kurt was sabotaging her mission. And that's because there's this race called the Selenites, which we mentioned very briefly at the beginning, but basically everybody who's been to space is considered a Selenite, and they're given a special status on Earth for whatever reason. And they're basically the ruling class. Kurt is the leader of a company who basically makes people into Selenites. I mean, you can't overstate the importance of that if you want to like move up in society, right? And so Anil was saying, I made this drive so that everybody could explore space cheaply, because apparently this drive is very efficient and it can get people places quickly and stuff like that. And so Kurt was like, well, we can't have that now. I want to be in control. At least that's how she put it. And obviously we're getting a biased opinion because it's only one person.
Yeah,
but
I'd like to talk to Kurt about this.
Yeah,
exactly. And so I found that if I had chosen to merge with Kaizen, that would have been a much more satisfying ending for me. But as it is, I can't really say that I had a great experience with the ending, because I just got stuck on a ship and it's just going to be floating around in space forever until he sends the next person.
The thing I thought was actually kind of interesting about that narrative is she also mentions at one point that like the point of the drive was not so much to make, not just to make it so everyone can travel, but also to expand colonization, that Kurt wanted to keep people on Earth where the class system was, whereas if they started actually colonizing space, then it would be much more ubiquitous, much more uniform.
Yeah, and I think they also state that Kurt didn't want them to colonize space, really. He wanted them to stay on Earth.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the graffitis that Anil did in the hallway to the bridge is a chart with like there was a prediction chart of like population on Earth, has that whole exponential growth thing with the dotted line. And that was definitely part of her argument.
Yeah, it's like turns out that's how capitalism works. It kind of relies on population growth.
Yeah. But what I thought was interesting is, I had mentioned before that, there's the different endings, and we were talking about whether there's a true ending. And the conclusion I came to was there's not really a true ending, but there are two narratives. And it's worth discussing which one we think is more likely accurate. And the two narratives is the Anil's narrative, which is Kurt sabotaged the mission, sabotaged your mission, and wants to get rid of the drive to basically keep the Selenites as a ruling class. But there's also the other one, which is Kaizen's viewpoint, which is this drive is actually dangerous. It could cause a black hole. And so we need to keep it from Earth, and we need to, destroy it if we are to keep humanity safe.
To be completely fair, Kaizen, even though from what we can tell is misinformed, is still like doing the admirable thing for what Kaizen's information bank tells it.
Yeah.
That was a very complicated sentence to make a simple point, but
yeah. But that is a question, like, because there's a huge point where, Kaizen's saying, it can create a black hole, and Anil is saying, no, you're wrong. Let me go do the math again. I thought that was sort of an interesting thing. Like, was there something that Anil just didn't get? Is there something she was missing? Which would benefit Kaizen's argument there? But if that's the case, then what exactly was up with Kurt's conversation with Kaizen in the logs? Like, Kurt obviously knew that Kaizen was going to keep the ship away from Earth. And so he was at least complicit in something. And so I'm trying to figure out that, Anil's story makes more sense, but is there a way that Kaizen could be in the right here?
So I'm a little bit, this is one of the things that frustrated me about that whole situation too, is that like, we learned that one of the rules of this AI is that it can't lie unless human lives are at risk. So why wasn't Kaizen just telling us of this potential scenario with the drive? He's just like, destroy the drive, that's how you get home. And it's like, why am I doing this? Why can't he just tell us? Why can't he just tell us to create a black hole?
He sort of does. You have to kind of probe him for it, but he'll say that if there is a small chance of failure, and if it fails, it can create a black hole.
Even if it's minuscule.
I just found that in the logs, so I didn't ask Kaizen about that too closely, I guess. And then on the other hand, why did Anil not just say, like, she's just like, oh, sit in this chair and we'll erase Kaizen. And I'm like, well, but I also want to go home. That's kind of how I'm role playing. Who's gonna get me out of this situation?
Then you role played your character correctly.
Yeah, but I didn't get the ending that I wanted. I didn't get to go home.
That doesn't matter. If you role played your character correctly and made the decisions that you think that character would have made in that situation, then you did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you completely. I'm just saying I was dissatisfied with the results of it.
Also, I don't think there's any ending where you're explicitly not going back to Earth. Even in the ending where Kaizen erases himself, he says, I'm giving you control over the ship, which means that if you wanted to go back to Earth, then you would just pilot the ship back to Earth manually.
What is the real time, like, space travel time to Europa right now? What, like 10 years?
It's like 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, that's not that bad.
Depends on if you have an ion drive.
That's not that bad. You can do that.
Yeah, like
it can take a while.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask, that I tried to ask Kaizen as I clicked no, I don't want to merge with Kaizen, and he rebooted, was like, how long is the security engine going to take us to get back to Earth? But that was a point at which it literally didn't matter what you saved in.
I did ask that question a couple times earlier on, and Kaizen always danced around it. It was always like, oh, not too long. Or
he'd always be like, the emergency drive will work or something like that. He never gave an exact time.
Okay, so
the closest answer I got was not too long.
Yeah, and if it's current, if we're talking current technology, 2017 technology, it's over a decade. So a long time. Also, the lights go out in that cutscene. Yeah, that's the other reason I was like, this seems very dark, and I don't think that I'm going to survive this.
Yeah,
So
I have a
I'm
feeling-
skeptical of Lewis's interpretation that you explicitly don't get to go home, which, while technically true, is unlikely in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get home, but you won't get home.
Yeah, I guess well, I also don't know how to run the ship. Like, presumably as an astronaut, the main character was trained to.
Yeah, wasn't
perform
Kaizen
operations
flying
in
the
other
ship?
Kind of. Again,
Kaizen's the
they don't
autopilot.
really explain that terribly
Well,
well.
they tell Kaizen to jump, so yes. And they're telling Kaizen to take them home.
Yeah, I guess I was under the impression that Kaizen was basically just
The ship.
the central computer. Like, he does everything.
Open
Yes,
the doors,
but there's
Hal.
also an implication that Kaizen wasn't everything. In fact, when you mention the profiler to him, he'll basically say, yeah, the profiler is the thing above me, that there's, he's running on a computer, but there's a computer governing even him. And presumably that would still be online if
That's
Kaizen
what the
got
people-
erased.
That's what the people have power over.
Yeah.
Because you can access that.
I
So
guess
presumably every single function Kaizen can do could be performed manually.
And it's really funny
it's
when
just like,
when
oh, do I know machine code? Can I type in the right commands to the literal memory and get it to run?
it's really
North.
funny.
North in space.
Space North.
Space.
I really like it when you do ask Kaizen about the profiler, because Kaizen's always like almost apprehensive, like, well, I hope you know what you're doing, or don't do
Yeah.
anything dumb, or
Yeah.
It's like, what? Okay, Kaizen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Those are some of my favorite responses from Kaizen. Was always well,
Yeah.
please don't do anything stupid. Or I hope you know exactly what you're doing. The first time I opened the profiler and Kaizen was essentially stated, I really hope you know exactly what you're doing. I was like, okay, now I'm concerned. I don't know if I should be in here. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, I just blop the numbers in.
A brief point that I wanted to mention. I noticed in watching the video, and I'm sure Lewis noticed this too, having played through it more than once, but the 7-digit code to get into the bridge changes every time. And
It's
so
4.
it's 4. Sorry, the number that I wrote down had a 7 in it when I had the code, but it's a 4-digit code. It changes every time, so you can't just skip past the whole game to go try more endings.
Yeah, no, I tried that. It didn't work. I was so upset.
That's sassy.
The other codes all stay the same though, so
Yeah. Speedruns of this game is like 20 minutes, so
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Wait, you've watched speedruns?
Oh.
No, I checked the times.
So Lewis, I wanted to ask you, it sounds like we're kind of wrapping up, but did you ever try sudo in the terminal?
No, but that sounds like it would have been a great thing to try.
I think that I tried it for a few things, like for the things that he said he wouldn't do, and he usually just ignored it and like said, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And there was no like, oh, I see you're trying to be tricky or anything like that, which I thought would have been cool. But
Sudo
is
it stands for super user do.
Yeah, and
it's the command in Unix to basically say run this as in the highest privilege level you can. So if you're like, remove file, and it's like, sorry, you don't have permissions to do that, you do sudo remove file, and it's like, okay.
Yep. All right.
Unless you don't have permissions, at which case it yells at you and it's like, this incident will be reported.
Okay.
No one knows who it's reported to, but it gets reported.
It's probably on the like log files.
Yeah, it means it's a log file, but
programmer speak? I don't know.
So anything else we want to talk about before we wrap this up?
There's one thing I want to mention, because I mentioned how the bot works, that there's the tag system, which is involved in lookup. But I found there were really only 2 problems I had with the AI, and they both involve the tags. Either it would not have the tags, wouldn't find the tags for what I was trying to say. So I'd enter in a sentence and it would clearly give me a response that meant, I don't know what you meant. And these are the responses like, maybe try asking me that later, or things like maybe give me a command and, ask me what to do directly and I'll do it sort of thing. Like, there's a lot of phrases it will say when it doesn't understand what you meant at all. And those become really obvious after a while. But the other one is sometimes it won't correctly match the verb tag correctly. So you might ask, what caused like United Earth or something. You might ask a question like that, and it doesn't understand like the created or cause word or whatever you use there, but it understands United Earth. So then it will just start rambling about like how it has a leader or something. Like it can get really off topic if it doesn't understand what you're asking about a thing.
I feel like there's times in this game where you're word hunting, almost,
Yeah.
where you're like, well, I need to get this response out of Kaizen, so how do I do that? And
Yeah.
you'll type in a sentence, and Kaizen will say something random. And then you'll type in
Yeah.
the same sentence with one word slightly differently, and Kaizen will give you something random. So I think I found what you're talking about.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I think the biggest example that I could find was trying to read the log files. If you say open logs, it will say, I have logs in all of my terminals. But if you say show logs, then it actually presents the logs.
If you say, Kaizen, show me the goddamn logs, Kaizen will be like, no.
Ask me nicely.
Kaizen, please show me the logs. Okay.
Yeah. No, it sometimes has trouble parsing kind of the verbs for the most part. Like it gets the nouns just fine, but it's usually the verbs I had trouble with if it understood the sentence.
Now, I would like to pose something. So Eggman mentioned that he thinks that the statement about the logs is a weakness. I just want to disagree with that. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I think the main struggle that this game has is it's not actually a 3D adventure. It's a text-based adventure. It's just a text-based adventure in a 3D world. Instead of playing Zork, and that's a cattail, instead of playing Zork on like in DOS, you're playing on screens on a screen. So it's weird like that. But instead of playing it in the real world, you're playing it in a video game. And I think a lot of people, at least initially, especially because after I play a game, before we do these shows, usually I fly around and I read I read some articles on the game, and I usually look at some reviews and see what other people have to say. And I especially with the Steam reviews, I encountered a lot of people who were like, I don't know what to do and I don't want to talk to this computer. And there's actually a number of negative reviews who clearly didn't finish the game, who basically say things like, I got confused. And I look at that and I'm like, well, you didn't talk to Kaizen enough. Because walking from terminal to terminal is kind of like that side of the game is essentially just fancy window dressing. It's pointless. You don't need that. All you need is the discussions with Kaizen. You could have this entire game in a text-based format with a little bit of description in between walking from terminal to terminal. You could make this game in DOS. Probably.
Maybe. But I think you would have lost something if you did it that way. I mean, a lot of it was kind of exploring the ship. A lot of it's done through the text edit, text thing, yes, but the atmosphere, the whole environment, the way, the environment is what you interact with through Kaizen, not just Kaizen himself.
Yeah.
And it would have been a very different game without that. And I don't necessarily think that the user reviews of like, I don't know what to do and I'm not talking to Kaizen are particularly damaging. I mean, if you go to the community page for this game, like one of the first things you'll see is someone who decided to get a refund on the game because during the pronoun question, they let you choose they. So people
that thought went through my head. That thought went through my head. Not that I could care less, whatever.
Yeah.
You be what you want to be, that's fine. But I saw that pop up, I'm like, oh, that's gonna trigger somebody.
Yeah, it's like
literally
no.
the first thing that popped into my head is that's gonna piss somebody off, and that is funny.
Yeah. If people want to find something to hate about a game, they'll find something to hate about a game. But I think the game, for what it tried to be, did a good job.
I also say I fail to see how the fact that I said that the statement of the logs was unclear to me has any bearing on whether or not I could figure it out. Like that, those are kind of disjointed arguments, and I would have to say that I didn't find that I had a ton of trouble figuring out the puzzles, and I didn't talk to Kaizen as much as it sounds like you guys did, but I still got through it.
I don't know. I don't think that that's a weakness. I genuinely think that, like, right now.
What,
And
what are you saying is a weakness, though?
what do you mean?
What are you saying is a weakness?
Well, I'm referring to what you stated by you think your inability to find the log files explicitly is a weakness of the game. I don't think that's a weakness of the game. I think that's.
I'm not saying that that's a weakness. I'm saying that the weakness is the fact that I didn't know that the log files existed until halfway through the game.
That's what I disagree. I don't think that that's a weakness necessarily.
Okay.
From my point of view, the whole game is just it's a game in a world about talking to an AI. So if you're not trying to get as much out of the AI as humanly possible, you're
doing it wrong.
I don't want to. I'm trying to not say you're doing. I'm trying to get around saying that.
Okay, so my problem then with that was that I tried to ask, like, I was given bad indications at the beginning of the game as to what the AI could do.
Okay.
I asked a few questions, and at the beginning of the game, I asked questions that it didn't really know what to do with. And I asked them in a few different ways, and it looked like it couldn't still do them. So I became kind of discouraged. I'm like, well, this AI doesn't look very robust. And so I kind of left off with like drilling really deep down into every single thing that I find, because I felt like it would just be a waste of my time.
Okay, that is a weakness then.
Yeah. The AI, I think, in general, did fairly well, at least towards the beginning of the game, before a lot of it's, it takes, for at least for me, it took time for the flaws to really come out. But after a while, like, particularly if you try to play it twice, a lot of its structure just becomes way too obvious. It's, the second time through, you realize that, you're looking for keywords and you need to just do verbs, and you can basically get away with almost not talking to Kaizen on a repeat playthrough.
Yeah.
You basically be a parrot and be like, I heard that these words were important. Kaizen, here's some important words.
I mean, I think you can go through the entire game with just show logs, open D number, and close D number. And what else do you need? Play piano. Just like a handful. You could basically play it like a text adventure game if you wanted to.
I think, would you say that then you would have appreciated it more if you were required to have a little bit of a deeper conversation with Kaizen then? Because it wasn't really required, and you certainly got a little bit more out of the game if you did, but it's not clear to me at least, that Kaizen is really that much of a character unless you want him to be.
I can see that, but at the same time, there's a couple of small points towards the beginning of the game where they try to convince you that this is a thing to do. I think when you open the second door, if you just immediately say open D2, he won't do it until you say a few more things. You basically have to encourage him to open that door.
I think it's...
And then, of course, there's a sequence where once you get to that waiting area, if you immediately say, in fact, open D3, at that point, it will sometimes say, like, you're not allowed there, guests wait in here. So you have to encourage him to do it. Whether you do that more naturally or not depends on you. But then you eventually open the door, you try to go through it, and then he shuts both doors and says, wait, you need to know about the drive. And then once you finally say, yes, I'll destroy the drive, it lets you through. And it's supposed to be around there. One of those sequences is supposed to sort of convince you that you need to be talking with Kaizen, from what I could tell. From there, it doesn't really force you, but those were sort of hints to sort of say, hey, this game is you talk to Kaizen to get through this game.
I think for me, the reason I was constantly encouraged to, or wanting to talk to Kaizen was, I love the idea. I like that idea of conversing with a computer, and you know, for Jacob Eggman here, I think you said that you role played it kind of as a tool. You know, you just it was a thing to help you progress through the game. For me, I want like it's a knowledge bank almost. It's a this is the story. This is how I get the story. This is how I find out about this world. So I'm going to abuse it as much as I possibly can and ask it dumb questions like, "Do you love me, Kaizen? Will you marry me?" I asked Kaizen to marry me at one point and said no. It was sad. It was just no.
Oh.
Like I like doing that with computers. I like asking dumb questions to see what it'll do. And sometimes, you know, you get nothing. Sometimes you get a random answer, and sometimes you get something that's kind of funny. And I like that.
Yeah. I think one of the best things that this game did was took its natural language parsing engine thing and attached it to a robot, essentially. That, you know, if you compare this game to something like Facade, where they took a actually more complicated system and applied it to human characters, its flaws become a bit more obvious because, you know, humans don't quite talk like how computer programs trying to sound like a human talking actually
Talk.
sound. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a guy who spent like 10 hours of my life talking to Cleverbot.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I find text-based AIs entertaining. So I think I'm just partial to enjoy talking to it.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't like the idea of talking with HAL 9000, then you're probably not going to really enjoy this game. But if the prospect of talking to HAL 9000, you know, interests you, then yeah.
Also, we got a comment in chat that just says it's the ultimate flaw of every text-based game. At halfway through the game, you're just optimizing your parsing to get the most out of what you're typing, which I think is
yeah.
It's just,
that's kind of the point that I got to. I think I got to it earlier than you guys, though.
I don't think I ever got to it because I go out of my way. I definitely I got to a point where I think I could have switched to that, and that was in the garden. When I got irritated with the computer and like super salty, and I couldn't figure out the puzzle. And I was just like, I need to get through this, and like damn near brute forcing it. But I think I made the collective decision to continue talking. Because as I said before, like the computer is the storytelling mechanism. Or at least that's what the game had told me up until that point, and partially because I needed to talk about it on story mode, and partially because I wanted to find out more. So just because the log files are in there already, and like I'm sitting here going, man, is there like secret stuff above this? Like, is there stuff I can find in here? Like, I want to know, like, is there like one specific phrase you type in that's just like a note from the developers or something? Like, I want that to be in there, you know? I want the Konami code to be in this game, but it's probably not there. Yeah.
Anyways, I think we're just about the point where we need to summarize and wrap up.
Yeah, I think we can do that now. I wanted to say my piece on why I think that the ability to miss things, I think, is a positive in games like this, even if it's divisive.
I mean, I just to kind of respond to that idea, I didn't really like the story in Mirror's Edge because I missed like the entire story because it's all in those sorts of hidden collectible stuff. But, you know, actually I had a friend who basically said, no, it's good. You just have to find all the collectible stuff. It's like, it's okay if your story has hidden elements, but its surface element still has to be interesting enough to get me invested. And this game did a good enough job of that. The whole story with the, like the whole preamble with the mission that you were on is interesting enough to kind of get you invested in trying to understand what's going on at the surface level, but then it pulls you in with the deep level story.
So yeah, this is kind of what I'll wrap up with. On that topic, comparing this to Virginia, a game that we've talked about on Story Mode before.
You should watch that episode.
Yeah, go for it. Watch that episode. But one of my complaints about that game was that I wanted to be able to have a different experience than other people. Whereas I was of the mind that that was more of a strict walking simulator. Like there was not really any decisions to be made. This one had decisions to be made, but now I felt like I missed too much, and my experience was dampened because of that. It was not as great. And actually, as we've gone through this episode, I realized like I was actually pretty positive on this game to start with, and I'm like, I don't know. I think there's actually a lot of flaws in this game, and I would say that it's still an enjoyable experience, but I won't go and play it again, for example.
Really?
I can see that.
Yeah, like my opinion during this podcast has actually gone down.
Huh.
Interesting.
I don't think mine's changed. I think I would fit in Steam categories. I would fit in the mostly positive category. I think that the flaws with the AI are a little annoying, and getting stuck on that one puzzle I just have no idea what needs to be done here, and I know I know how I need to progress. I just don't know how I need to get what I need to progress. Was immensely frustrating. It turns out that I didn't finish doing everything outside, and I need to go back, push a button to move a bed. But I think it's cool, and I think I'm just partial to love this game because it's literally my perfect brand of sci-fi. Like, if you could say, Greg, what is your favorite genre of film, writing, anything? It's that creepy, weird, never ends well horror sci-fi Event Horizon type stuff. That is me. That's what I like. So I'm partial to like it just because of that, but I think that the game's flaws don't destroy it. I think it's a game, and I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah.
Lewis, any final thoughts?
I mean, you'd said you thought like the Steam rating should be kind of mostly positive. I'd say it should be very positive. Like, it wasn't the most but not the best experience, but it was good.
Well, you gotta remember,
I don't regret playing it, and I think it's worth trying out. I don't think it will be your game of the year or whatever, but it's good. It's worth playing.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's worth the 3 hours. It's worth the $20. Well, maybe 10 to 20.
It was 40% off when I bought it this morning.
Nice. Good stuff. And I paid $21.99 for it, Canadian. I paid full price. And I don't feel ripped off. I'd play it again. I'd play it again to try and get the achievements because damn, none of them unlocked.
I got all but 2. Now I need to get Kaizen to try to kill me, and I need to find all of the hidden messages.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to say about the mostly positive ratings, you got to remember that starts with 80% positive reviews. If you hit 80 on Steam, you hit mostly positive, and that's, if I don't like number scales, but that's about what I give it. I give it an 8-ish, like high 7 to mid 8-ish out of 10, because I am positive on the game. I enjoyed it. I think it was fun, and I would like to play more by Ocelot Society, and I'm curious to see what they're working on. So yeah,
Cool stuff.
so that was fun. We're gonna move to after hours, which means for those of you who are watching live, if you're watching my stream right now, we're gonna switch over to IRL. The overlay will stay the same because I don't think we have an after hours one for today, which is fine. And we're just gonna hang out for like an hour. And then
I can create an after hours one.
to anybody who watched this, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Storymode podcast. Lewis, Thyeggman, do either of you guys want to shout out on anything? It's just the ad for Kaizen down beneath us, so we don't have a guest host to yell at us about promoting stuff. But do you guys want to talk about anything that you're doing?
I'll just mention my twitch.tv/LRFLEW. I will hopefully be streaming once everything gets settled IRL. So look out for that.
And Thyeggman?
I'll encourage you to stick around for the after show where I tell about how it was 115 degrees in Vegas when I was there last week.
Okay.
Or 46 for those Canadian / metric.
Too
AKA
damn hot.exe. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for watching the Story Mode podcast. And I don't know how you found the show, but you're awesome if you did. And thank you very much for watching. And we'll do this again next month, like actually a couple weeks, because
We're behind.
we do this every Sunday. You can follow us on Twitter at Real Story Mode. You can see all the VODs on my YouTube channel, which is GG Blind One, but it's down beneath the stream, and we're on SoundCloud and Google Play. So thanks for watching. Bye.